You reply instantly, stay available, and think that consistency builds attraction. You compliment everything she does, hoping she finally notices your effort. And at first, it seems like it's working exactly how you imagined. She smiles more, texts back fast, and gives you just enough attention. But then something shifts, and you feel it before you understand it. Her replies get shorter, her energy drops, and she feels slightly distant. You start overthinking every message, wondering what you suddenly did wrong. So you try harder, more attention, more effort, more emotional investment daily. And that's when attraction doesn't grow, it quietly starts fading away. Because what feels like love to you feels predictable and safe to her. And predictable energy rarely creates emotional tension or lasting romantic desire. Think about the last time something truly stayed stuck inside your mind. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. It made you feel something deeper. That same emotional contrast is what drives real attraction in modern dating. And without realizing it, you've been removing that tension from every interaction. You became easy to read, easy to predict, and easy to replace. Not because you lacked value, but because she fully understood you too fast. And the moment she understands everything, the curiosity slowly disappears completely. So if doing everything right leads to losing her, what actually works instead? Because what you believed about attraction is exactly what's pushing her away. You were told being kind, consistent, and supportive is the ultimate strategy. And yes, that builds comfort, but comfort alone rarely builds deep attraction. Because attraction thrives on tension, curiosity, and emotional unpredictability over time. Think about it. Nobody replays a moment that felt completely safe forever. The brain remembers what it cannot fully explain or emotionally resolve yet. That's why mystery, contrast, and uncertainty trigger stronger emotional attachment loops. So, when you remove all uncertainty, you remove the reason to feel. You become clear, stable, and easy, but also forgettable in modern dating. And that's the uncomfortable truth most people never want to admit openly. You didn't lose because you cared. You lost because you were obvious. Because when she can predict your next move, the excitement disappears quickly. And without excitement, attention fades, even if everything else still feels right. So instead of asking how to be better, ask how to be felt. Because attraction is not built on logic, it is built on emotional experience. And once you understand that shift, everything about your approach will change. So if comfort isn't enough, what actually creates emotional pull and obsession? What actually creates attraction is something most people completely overlook every day. It's not just about making her feel good, it's about emotional range. Because the brain doesn't bond through comfort, it bonds through contrast and change. That's basic psychology. Dopamine spikes when outcomes are uncertain and dynamic. Think about your favorite shows. They're never calm, they're full of tension. Highs and lows, connection and distance, clarity mixed with emotional confusion. That emotional contrast is what keeps people watching and feeling deeply invested. And attraction works the exact same way in real human relationships today. If every interaction feels the same, the brain quickly adapts and loses interest. But when emotions shift, the brain pays attention and starts forming attachment. This is called emotional variability, and it drives powerful attraction loops subconsciously. So when you only provide comfort, you remove the stimulus that creates desire. You become stable, predictable, and emotionally flat, even if you mean well. But when your energy shifts naturally, curiosity begins to build inside her mind. She starts noticing patterns, then questioning them, then thinking about you more. And that's when attraction stops being logical and starts becoming emotional. So the real question isn't how to impress her, it's how to move her. Because once you move her emotions, you move her attention without forcing anything. And once attention is captured, attachment begins forming whether she wants it or not. So, how does this actually play out in real life situations you experience daily? You meet her casually, no pressure, no plan, just natural conversation flowing. You're not trying too hard, and that alone already feels different to her. You joke a little, then go quiet, then shift topics unexpectedly and smoothly. She notices it, not consciously, but something about you feels less predictable. The first day, you talk for hours, energy high. Connection feels effortless. The next day, you're busy, not ignoring her, just living your own life. She checks her phone, notices your absence, and starts wondering about you. Not because you disappeared, but because the pattern slightly changed this time. When you come back, you're warm again, but not exactly the same energy. Sometimes you agree, sometimes you challenge her, sometimes you just smile silently. And slowly, she stops focusing on what you say and studies you instead. She replays small moments, your tone, your pauses, your unexpected reactions, because now interacting with you feels like something she can't fully predict. And the brain loves solving patterns it hasn't completely figured out yet. So curiosity builds, not forced, not fake, just naturally through your behavior. She leans in more, asks more questions, tries to understand you deeper. And without realizing it, she's investing emotionally, step by step, into you. Because now you're not just another guy, you're something slightly different, something she can't label quickly, and that keeps her attention locked longer. So, what feels like small changes to you feels like a puzzle to her. So, how do you actually apply this without playing fake mind games? It starts with having a real life that doesn't revolve around her attention. You're not always available because your time is already filled with purpose. Sometimes you reply fast, sometimes you wait, depending on your actual situation. That inconsistency isn't forced, it comes from living instead of chasing validation. When you speak, you don't agree with everything just to keep things smooth. You add your own perspective, sometimes playful, sometimes slightly challenging her. Not to win, but to create interaction that feels alive and engaging. Because constant agreement feels flat, but contrast creates emotional movement instantly. You also don't over-explain your actions, you leave space for interpretation. That space becomes curiosity, and curiosity keeps her thinking about you later. When she asks what you're doing, you don't give a full detailed breakdown. You keep it simple, slightly vague, then smoothly shift the conversation forward. Now she's not just listening, she's trying to understand what's behind you. And that subtle mystery builds interest far stronger than constant reassurance ever could. At the same time, you still show attention, but never all at once. Because giving everything removes anticipation, and anticipation is what fuels attraction deeply. So you balance presence and distance, warmth and calm, without forcing anything unnatural. And that balance creates emotional rhythm, the key driver behind strong attraction patterns. But most people take this too far and completely destroy their chances without noticing. And this is exactly where most people completely ruin everything without realizing it. They hear unpredictability, then start acting cold, distant, and emotionally unavailable on purpose. They delay replies artificially, ignore messages, and create fake tension that feels unnatural. At first, it might create curiosity, but quickly it starts damaging trust and connection. Because forced behavior always feels off, even if she can't explain why. The brain detects inconsistency between intention and authenticity, and it pulls away. So instead of building attraction, you slowly create confusion mixed with subtle discomfort. And that discomfort doesn't turn into desire. It turns into emotional resistance over time. Another mistake is trying to control every reaction instead of letting things flow naturally. You start calculating every message, every pause, every response like it's a strategy game. But attraction isn't built through control. It's built through authentic emotional experience. When you overthink, you lose presence. And presence is what creates real connection. You also risk becoming inconsistent in a way that feels unstable, not intriguing. And instability doesn't create attraction. It creates uncertainty that feels unsafe emotionally. So the goal isn't to confuse her, it's to avoid being one-dimensional always. You're not trying to manipulate, you're simply allowing different sides of yourself to show. That creates natural variation, which feels real instead of calculated or strategically designed. Because authenticity combined with emotional contrast is what actually drives deep attraction. And once that authenticity is gone, everything starts feeling forced and easy to walk away from. So, if fake unpredictability fails, what actually keeps her thinking about you consistently? What actually keeps her thinking about you is something deeper than behavior. It's how your presence creates unfinished emotional loops inside her mind daily. When interactions don't fully resolve, the brain keeps trying to complete them later. This is called the Zeigarnik effect, and it drives powerful mental replay patterns. So, when you leave slight mystery, her mind naturally returns to you again. She replays your tone, your pauses, your unexpected shifts in energy repeatedly. Not because you told her to, but because her brain seeks emotional closure. And that loop keeps running even when you're not physically present anywhere. The more she replays, the more emotional weight gets attached to your presence. And that attachment feels real because it's generated from her own mind. You didn't force attention, you triggered a process that sustains itself over time. This is why uncertainty, when natural, becomes one of the strongest attraction drivers. Because certainty ends curiosity, but curiosity keeps attention locked for much longer. So instead of chasing her focus, you allow her brain to chase resolution. And once that happens, effort shifts. She starts investing without being asked directly. But here's where everything flips in a way most people never expect coming. And this is the twist most people never see coming until it's too late. The same emotional loop, pulling her in, slowly starts pulling you in too. You notice yourself checking your phone, waiting longer than you expected. You replay her words, her tone, her reactions, trying to understand her more. Because once emotional investment starts, it rarely stays one-sided for long. The same curiosity you triggered begins forming inside your own mind quietly. And suddenly, you're not just creating attraction, you're experiencing it deeply yourself. That's when control becomes illusion and connection becomes something real and mutual. So what started as strategy slowly turns into something harder to manage emotionally. Because real attraction is never about control, it's about shared emotional momentum. And once both sides are pulled in, the dynamic becomes unpredictable for you too. Which means the question is no longer how to attract her, but what happens next. So what happens next depends on whether you understand this dynamic or not. Because attraction was never about tricks. It was always about emotional experience. You don't win by being perfect, you win by being impossible to fully predict. Not fake, not cold, just layered, real, and emotionally dynamic over time. You bring presence when it matters, and space when it creates anticipation. That balance is what keeps connection alive instead of fading into routine. Because routine feels safe, but safety alone rarely creates lasting desire. It's the contrast, the shifts, the moments that feel slightly uncertain sometimes. That's what makes someone stay on your mind long after interaction ends. And that's why some people are remembered, while others are quickly forgotten. You don't chase attention, You create an experience that attention follows naturally. And once she starts thinking about you without effort, everything already changed. So stop trying to be understood completely and start being felt instead. Because once she feels something real, logic no longer controls her attention. And when attention is no longer logical, attraction becomes almost impossible to ignore. So the real question isn't how to get her, it's can you handle it? We're not done yet, because there's one detail most people still miss. Even when you understand attraction, execution is what separates results from theory. You can know everything but still fail if your energy doesn't align naturally. Because people don't respond to words, they respond to emotional consistency underneath. If your actions feel forced, the entire dynamic breaks without obvious explanation. That's why self-control, confidence, and internal stability matter more than tactics. You don't chase reactions, you create presence that naturally influences how she feels. And that presence comes from having a life that doesn't depend on validation. So instead of focusing on her, you focus on becoming someone worth noticing. That shift alone changes your behavior without needing constant mental calculation. Because now you're not trying to attract, you're simply expressing who you are. And that authenticity creates emotional contrast without needing to fake anything, which means attraction becomes a byproduct, not something you force into existence. And once you reach that point, everything starts working without feeling like effort. So, before you try any strategy, ask yourself one brutally honest question. Are you building attraction, or are you just trying to avoid being forgotten? And if you made it this far, you already feel the shift happening. Because now you're not just hearing this, you're starting to see patterns. You recognize moments where you were predictable and how that affected attraction. You remember times when mystery existed and how much stronger it felt. That awareness is the first step, but applying it is where everything changes. So, next time you interact, don't try to be perfect or overly impressive. Focus on being present, slightly unpredictable, and emotionally engaged in the moment. Let conversations breathe, let silence exist, and let curiosity naturally build over time. Because attraction grows in space, not in constant pressure or forced interaction. And when you stop forcing outcomes, outcomes start aligning in unexpected ways. You don't need to control everything. You need to create moments that feel real. Moments that stay in her mind long after the interaction has already ended. That's how attention turns into curiosity. And curiosity turns into lasting attraction. And once attraction feels natural, it no longer needs to be chased constantly. So, instead of asking how to make her obsessed, ask something deeper instead. Are you creating an experience she won't forget, or just another conversation? And before you leave, there's one final truth most people avoid completely. Attraction is not something you take. It's something that emerges naturally over time. The moment you try to force it, you reveal need. And need weakens perception. Because emotional control always starts with controlling your own internal state first. If you feel desperate, that energy leaks into every word and action you take. But when you feel grounded, your presence alone starts influencing the interaction. That's why high-value energy isn't said, it's felt through subtle behavior. You don't need to prove anything because your life already reflects your value. And that removes pressure, which ironically increases attraction without direct effort. So instead of chasing her attention, you build a life that attracts attention. That's the real shift, from seeking validation to becoming someone worth noticing. And once that shift happens, everything you do carries a different weight. Your silence feels intentional, your words feel stronger, your presence feels rare. And rarity is what makes something valuable in any social dynamic today. So, the game was never about her. It was always about your positioning. And once you understand that, you stop chasing and start becoming instead.